Now move on to the questions for Minister of Education. We will start with the listed questions. I call on Mark Durkan. Mark.
Ceiste Verheyen, question 1.
Deputy Speaker, my department's consultation on the future of SIA's GCSEs, AS levels and A levels is an opportunity for students, parents, educators, employers and wider stakeholders to contribute by sharing their views on how we can improve the structure, content and assessment of these qualifications. This includes a proposal to remove AS levels to reduce the pressure on students and teachers and to free up time for teaching and deeper learning. My proposals reflect a clear ambition to ensure that SIA, GCSEs, AS levels and A levels remain relevant both nationally and internationally. And in relation to concerns about applying for higher education in the Republic of Ireland, I can confirm that if the decision is made to remove SIA AS levels, standalone AS levels from other awarding organisations would still be available for the very small number of students requiring them, and consideration will be given to any concerns raised through the consultation process.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I'm glad to have some clarification there from the Minister, and obviously the consultation is ongoing. Could he elaborate in terms of those AS levels that will still be available and will still be acceptable to the CAO?
Obviously, schools are able to, if they wish to bring in other awarding bodies and qualifications, that they would be able to do that. What I would say, obviously, is this is a consultation exercise. I've listened to principals, some who are very passionate about removing AS levels because of the increased time that is spent in preparing for tests and the pressure that creates both for the teacher but also the pupils. But I've also heard from some principals who would be strong advocates for their retention. So I've put this out for consultation in order to get the views of the sector, but also where there are implications. Obviously, if there was implications for entry into courses in the Republic of Ireland, that's something that would need to be taken into account before any decision would be taken on this matter. I have an open mind on this, but I do see the merits behind the proposals in terms of reducing the amount of time our young people are being tested and increasing the amount of time that they get to actually learn and to be taught in the classroom.
Deputy Speaker, Minister, could you tell us what the timeline is for decisions regarding AS levels, please?
Speaker, I intend to confirm my policy framework intentions early in 2026. Following this, SIA regulation would be required to prepare a regulatory framework from which SIA, being the awarding organisation, would undertake a full revision of their qualifications. Previously, this process has taken a minimum of 2 years prior to the rollout of new specifications. So when we get the consultation responses back, we'll assess them and then we'll determine the way forward. But I intend to do that early in 2026.
Minister, you alluded to it, but there's a lot of concern about the removal of AS levels and how it might impact on the health and well-being of young people. Have you or your department engaged with the Children's Commissioner on this, the Secondary School Student Union or the Mental Health Champion on these proposals?
Opportunity for everybody to participate in the consultation, but the process that was followed before we went out to consultation included engagement with a whole range of stakeholders, including pupils, their voices being heard on the matter, and also then teachers as well. So the issue is one where I recognise there is increased anxiety given the amount of testing that takes place of our young people, particularly in years 11, 12, 13 and 14. And they are on a constant conveyor belt of examinations, and then they are being prepped for that, often being taught to the test. I think we need to recalibrate where people actually have an opportunity to engage in a rich curriculum, have detailed understanding of the subject matter, and of course assessment will always be part of our qualification system. But if you take AS levels, for example, Deputy Speaker, we have preparations for those examinations within months of just starting your lower sixth year. Then schools will often have the young people off to prepare for their mocks. That could be 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Then your AS levels are completed in May, and some schools don't bring the children back in for the entire month of June. That can be up to 7 weeks of the lives of those young people where they're not in the classroom, they're not being taught, but because they are subject to an examination process. I see the merits behind those who are arguing that we should remove them, but I also am alert to some of the arguments that are brought forward to me as to why there's an opportunity for retention, because that can be a wake-up call for some young people if their results don't go as they would intend, and that can help motivate them. But also concerning to me, we have a very small number of schools who then withdraw the opportunity for those young people to complete their A-levels, having only allowed them to do 1 year of study, and then they're abandoned. And I don't believe that that's appropriate either. So there is a mixed environment to take a view on this. I genuinely hope we will get a range of views, and then we can proceed as to what we determine the best way forward.
Councillor Berdal, question 2, please.
Deputy Speaker, the major capital project for Dean McGurk College was announced in 2022. It remains on hold. As I've previously said, I will continue to keep all projects that were announced under the Major Capital Works programme in March 2022 that are currently on hold under review. However, delivery of all announced projects will be very much dependent on securing additional and significant sustained capital funding.
I'd like the Minister for his response. Minister, has your department engaged with CCMS in terms of moving forward a development proposal for Dean McGurk?
Well, the College, Deputy Speaker, currently, and the member has advocated on their behalf consistently over the past year and a half. The College currently has an approved admission and enrolment number of 80 and 440 respectively. However, as I've previously advised, CCMS is seeking to increase these numbers through the development proposal. In the interim, the school can continue to request additional places on an annual basis through a temporary variation process until a DP is brought forward. I understand that CCMS wrote to the school in April 2025 and provided an update on the progress of the development proposal submission. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, obviously as the decision maker as to when a development proposal comes before my desk, it would be inappropriate for me to comment further.
Which schools announced under the Major Capital Works programme in March 2022 have now progressed in planning?
So, Deputy Speaker, it was an extensive list that was published back then, well in excess of 20 schools. We were able to move forward on 7 projects. That was Carrickfergus Academy, Dromore High School, Edmund Rice College, Loretto College and Coleraine, Malone Integrated College, Mercy College and Portadown College. In each of those 7, the integrated consultant teams have been appointed and the initial feasibility studies to explore potential accommodation options for each school are underway.
Question number 3 has been withdrawn. Number 4, Michelle Guy.
Deputy Speaker, my officials are currently reviewing potential legislative gaps and are working to develop departmental guidance on the issue of children missing in education. Addressing the issue of children missing in education effectively requires a coordinated multi-agency approach, and to that end, my officials continue to engage with colleagues in the Department of Health and the Education Authority, exploring opportunities for improved information sharing and collaborative action in this policy area. Work is underway to examine the processes and policies in place across other jurisdictions with a view to identifying best practice and informing local approaches. In parallel, consideration is being given to the range of data sources that may be required to support a more effective response to children missing in education.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for that answer. The issue of children missing education is a serious one, and it is a genuine safeguarding concern, so thank you for the work that you're taking forward within the Department. I first asked this question in relation to the tragedy of Kieran Duran in the South, and the answer that I got, I was so concerned about that I had to do everything I could as a private member to try and address this issue. So, Minister, the question is, as the Minister with the power to act, can you give assurances that within this mandate there will be movement and progress on legislation, on guidance and on data sharing?
Can I thank the member for the question, and her concern is one that I share. Obviously, we know when it comes to attendance levels, children who are enrolled at a school and who don't attend, and there's a process of education welfare officers, and we know already in the first 4 weeks of the academic year there are children who still have not went to school, and they are actively being pursued by the EWOs within the Education Authority and by those schools. What we don't know, because there is no legislative requirement for children and families who are born, the responsibility is on parents to pursue an educational place for them. If they don't register their child or enrol in a school, and that may be potentially to have them homeschooled, there's no legislative requirement to inform the Department of Education or EA in those circumstances. Where a child is registered and deregistered, we know if they have been deregistered. But also there is a challenge in terms of sharing information, because obviously we know how many people are born in Northern Ireland. We have a record of that. But what we don't know is if in those families where they are born, they subsequently leave the jurisdiction. So there is a lack of information, which does require, as I referenced in the original response, collaboration between health and EA. But we also need to be able to determine with clear and factual information how many children are missing in education. I think I've outlined where I believe there are gaps in the information, and that also then has an impact on how effective we are in being able to address those particular concerns. So it is something that the department is actively working on. Whether I can give a guarantee to the member that that would lead the legislation within this mandate, that remains to be seen, but let me assure the member there is an urgency in respect of making sure that we have as much information as possible to help us.
Cancoila. Minister, can I ask you about another group of children who aren't able to access education, and that's those children who are experiencing emotional-based school non-attendance. I recently met with parents who are experiencing this, and they told me really heartbreaking stories. Can I ask you what steps you're taking to make sure that these children receive the right support and that schools also receive the right resources to respond?
Well, the range of reasons why people don't attend school often can be multifaceted. The member has outlined one reason why a child may not be in attendance at school, and there are many others. Where they are registered, we know if they're not attending, there is support there that, yes, the question would be asked, how effective is it? But the education welfare officers can proactively engage with those families. So on the particular issue, I'm happy to look more into the detail around that particular aspect. But I assure members, we want our children to be in school. It's where they're safest and it's where they are best placed to gain an education. It's in nobody's interests for them not to be attending school.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In a previous mandate, I raised serious concerns about children missing from care and the lack of data associated with this in the Department of Health. So the lack of accurate data in relation to this, as an example, is again very alarming. Can I ask the Minister who has responsibility for the monitoring of protocols regarding children missing education?
So the Education Welfare Service within EA has the operational responsibility for children missing in education, and there are a number of procedures and protocols in place. That also includes protocols where children are missing in education in terms of with other colleagues in other jurisdictions, because that is an issue as well for us. So it's the Education Welfare Service. They have the operational responsibility in this area, and the reason why some members have highlighted particular examples, but the information that was published in a media article is as a result of the work of the department in trying to understand what is the data held by GPs, by the health service, what is the information that we are lacking, and in terms of trying to move forward on this. That has generated obviously a fair degree of interest, which is welcome, but we need to be able to move beyond that kind of scoping work to actual real meaningful processes to help identify children who are missing and what we're doing to make sure that they're engaged in education.
Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Deputy Speaker, whilst my department has no remit for education provision for young people with special educational needs beyond the age of 19, I am committed to working with the Economy and Health Ministers to ensure that young people with special educational needs are supported as they transition out of the school system into adult life. In terms of engagement on post-19 education, I did respond to the Minister's Archibald's paper to the Executive on post-school provision for young people with special educational needs in July of 2025. I've confirmed my broad support for her proposals and signalling my commitment to working with her department and taking forward proposals In addition, my officials have engaged extensively with colleagues in the Department of Economy and Health through a cross-departmental working group on transitions as part of the end-to-end review of special educational needs. And as we move forward, one of the actions within the SEN Reform Delivery Plan is the development of a transitional support programme, and collaboration working across the 3 departments is expected to continue.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his fulsome answer. In this regard, there's been a lot of debate about this since we've returned to the Assembly, but families are struggling to understand what those timescales might look like for delivery, and I understand that it is perhaps lies more with the Minister for Economy. From my perspective, with the work that you have undertaken in the SEN space, you have a significant part to play. Is there any timescales you can add to when delivery might happen and change might occur?
The work of trying to ensure that the transition process is better is one that is currently active and ongoing. That is why we need to ensure, particularly under the legislation that we have, up until the age of 19, within that academic year, you stay within the education settings. After that, then, there is the transition process that health and economy are involved in. And that is something we need to ensure works better than what it currently is. There are good examples where it does work, but there's obviously areas of concern where it doesn't work as effectively as it should. So that's where a big focus is across our 3 departments. How do we effectively manage that transition process? I have a particular interest in ensuring that that is effective, because we have thousands of children needing entry into our special schools at ages 3, 4, 5. Including then into post-primary type settings. And we also then need to make sure that there is a flow of young people who are leaving the education settings and transitioning with the economy and health playing their role. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to accommodate all the children that are rightly wanting to have their place confirmed in those new settings. So the transition process is hugely important for us to make that more effective, and obviously the Minister for Economy is leading in this area, but I can assure members that I'll play my full part in supporting proposals that she has brought forward to the Executive.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And the original question highlighted the cross-cutting nature of this, and I think that is absolutely right to do so. But in terms of your department's responsibilities, the EA Transition Service, it is my understanding that as of April this year, there were 9,000 young people in the system needing to avail of that service. Can you give assurances to the Assembly that that service is properly resourced to meet the level of demand that's clearly there in the system?
Well, can I thank the member for that question? The transition service is currently supporting over 11,000 young people, and as with all SEN supports, the transition service, he is right, is stretched given the unprecedented increase in the number of young people with special educational needs. I referenced the reform agenda and the delivery plan that I published in respect of that. That does include an action to implement a transitional support programme which is building on the EA's existing service. Full implementation of this action does require some additional funding, which is currently over and above my current budget, but there are certainly plans there, if we can effect them, that will assist the EA's transition service in managing these issues.
And thank the Minister for his question so far, and also to the member across the way for asking this question. Minister, do you agree with me that actually transition process, wherever it may lie, whether it's going to primary school, from nursery, whether it's going to secondary school, is actually really, it's traumatic for parents because it's so poorly managed? And have you had any conversations with the Health Minister about a health and care plan that goes throughout a child's life whenever they have additional needs, from birth right up until post-19, to ensure that all those children achieve the best that they possibly can, that we remove this trauma for families?
Deputy Speaker, the member rightly outlines the emotional distress that is often experienced by families who rightly will campaign and care for their loved ones. And within that school environment, whilst there are still challenges, the school environment is very effective at supporting those young people. And as they approach 19 years of age, there is a fear as to what level of support, or indeed lack of, will exist after that post-19 experience is there. That's why there needs to be a more effective process to allow our young people to be able to move from the special educational needs type setting into other areas which health and economy have responsibility on. So I do agree there needs to be a better way that is processed and managed, and it is the parents who are often carrying the weight of the burden and responsibility that they feel because they want the very best for their child. We need to give effect to their ambitions and hopes for their young people to support them. It's where best placed that support lies that we need to just ensure we are giving effect to. So my department has a role to play, but there are two other departments that have a key role to play in all of this. It can't be left to either Minister Archibald or Minister Nesbitt or indeed myself on this. There's a collective responsibility in all of us to do better in this area.
Question 6 has been withdrawn from the city here. Question number 7. Peter Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Question 7.
Deputy Speaker, literacy is the foundation of all education. Proficiency in reading, writing and spoken language is vital for pupils' success in school, in training and in work. I've signalled my intention to develop a new strategy for literacy which is grounded in international best practice and the latest evidence. The strategy will be developed in parallel with the work of the Curriculum Task Force and will provide guidance to support schools in developing pupils' reading, writing and oracy skills. It will also set out a comprehensive programme of action to support teachers across Northern Ireland. In advance of this, I plan to issue a literacy circular to outline the key principles for effective literacy instruction, alongside practical strategies to enhance literacy development. This will be supported by professional learning opportunities in areas such as the science of reading, spelling, writing and oracy. And through the RAISE programme, I've introduced a reading with artificial intelligence research project that will provide schools with an opportunity to see how AI tools can support literacy. The studies led by Oxford Brookes University using Amira Learning, a reading support tool that is aligned with research-informed approaches to early literacy and powered by AI.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Minister. Could I ask the Minister what the research tells us about current literacy outcomes?
Well, can I thank the member for the further question in this area? So, whilst schools will hold their own rich data on pupils' progress and attainment, our system has limited publicly available national data on how children are performing in literacy throughout primary school and Key Stage 3, as the end of Key Stage assessment arrangements were not widely operational from 2014-15 right through to 23-24. But in the 24-25 academic year, we saw a return of end of Key Stage assessments for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic. Assessments were based on teacher judgment against the levels of progression in communication and using mathematics. This gave us a clearer understanding of where our education system stands following the challenges of recent years, and the data published by SEA shows that nearly 3 in 10 pupils are not achieving at the expected levels in literacy and numeracy by the end of primary school. And this is a significant concern, particularly as these foundational skills are essential for pupils' future learning, well-being and life opportunity. It's also a stark reminder of the challenges that we face, and it highlights the urgent need for a renewed focus on literacy and numeracy across our schools. So this new data provides a vital baseline to inform targeted support and future interventions.
Mr Deputy Speaker, the Minister will be aware that the importance of reading is promoted through the Sure Start programme. Does he have any plans to further expand this provision in Northern Ireland as part of the forthcoming early learning and childcare strategy?
Speaker, not only have we expanded Sure Start through the early years funding that the Executive provided ring-fenced support to, we were able to stabilise that organisation and we expanded its reach. So where there were temporary schemes in place, we've been able to mainstream them into a permanent zoning of areas where Sure Start operate, and there can now be referrals into the Sure Start areas from neighbouring areas as well. So we've been able to enhance Sure Start, but we've also provided funding in those early years in things like Book Start, because the member rightly highlights not only is it important that young people are proficient in reading and develop the skills, they need to get a love for reading. I wasn't someone who really enjoyed reading, didn't do enough of it whenever I was at school, but we need to cultivate that environment where there is a love of reading, because all of the evidence shows that that can have a really significant impact on the future academic success of those young people as they progress through our education system.
Deputy Speaker.
Deputy Speaker, where delivery of specialist provision accommodation has been delayed, the Education Authority has been working with affected schools to ensure that contingency arrangements are in place to mitigate the impact on pupils and their families. Each individual capital work project is overseen by a dedicated project manager to monitor the delivery programme. However, unforeseen circumstances can still arise, such as the discovery of a live electrical cable at the Sierra School in the Members' Own constituency, which will inevitably impact on the delivery programme. My department, working with the Education Authority, continues to monitor active capital work schemes to reduce delays as far as possible.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for that answer. And Minister, you've referenced Sierra Special School, where a number of children have faced delays, and that has left their families feeling let down and as though their children are at the back of the queue. So can I ask, what assurance can you give that progress will be made towards a second campus for Sierra so that we don't see a repeat of this issue in future academic years?
There's 2 points. He rightly highlights the delay in the particular issue where a live cable was identified. When it comes to trying to resolve that issue around the modular accommodation, that has been constructed off-site and is ready for installation once the site is fully prepared. The contractor has indicated a projected completion date of the 5th of December, but can I say to the member, the Education Authority is actively working to accelerate the programme to get progress in advance of this date. On the wider issue of a new build, the member will know that only last week we had a statement around special educational needs capital investment. There's detailed plans that the EA have produced where we've mapped out every special school in terms of the provision that they need. That is something that is currently before the Executive in terms of the 10-year plan for investment, and it's through that long-term approach of investment we would be able to address the capacity issues that the member's school that he has referenced is dealing with, and indeed schools across all members' constituencies are currently facing challenges when it comes to capacity.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for his response. Minister, it is important that we mitigate all of these delays where possible. Minister, can you outline why specialist provision accommodation is delayed?
Minister. So the delay in delivery of accommodation to provide placements for SEND pupils can occur for a number of reasons. I outlined in the Assembly on the 16th of September the number of children with SEND requiring placement far outstrips the places that are currently available. That can impact on delay in providing and naming a school where a placement can be provided. Working with the EA, we engaged with schools over the past year and a half, and that has identified the potential solutions. However, in some instances, it's only been possible to confirm these at a very late stage. This resulted in a compressed timeline for delivery, which, despite every effort being taken to expedite completion, this must also include necessary approvals, tender processes, and unfortunately, it's not always feasible to deliver accommodation in time for the commencement of the academic year. So there can be unforeseen events which I've referenced around the discovery of an electrical cable, but the issue that we are facing is a lack of capacity across our school estate, particularly for special schools, but also when it comes to specialist provision in mainstream settings. I outlined on the 16th of September a clear plan that will address this in the long term. We still have to react to need, and that varies in certain parts of Northern Ireland where there's higher level of need, and we engage with schools. And I welcome the positive engagement that I've had with a number of school principals and again from the National Association of Head Teachers Trade Unions, who has been proactive in seeking to engage with principals at a much earlier stage in this process, because it is only by a collective effort by all of our schools and the Education Authority and my department will we be able to provide the right support for young people who deserve it.
Question number 9.
Of those statements completed in August 2025, 44% were issued outside the 26-week time frame.
That's not great. What are you doing to improve that?
I'm glad it was short enough for the member to be able to get a response in, because I agree with him. It's not an acceptable time frame. What I can say to the member that we have new special educational needs regulations which will reduce the timescales associated with statutory assessments. That process we aim to reduce from 26 to 22 weeks, but obviously that is only a positive outcome if 100% of assessments are carried out within that 22 weeks. So we're currently finalising those regulations and I'll bring them to the Assembly in due course.
That ends the period for listed questions. We'll now move on to 15 minutes of topical questions. I call on Matthew O'Toole. Matthew.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Minister, just a couple of weeks ago, you announced your desire, and a vitally important subject it is, to get £1.7 billion in investment for special educational needs facilities and schools. Your colleague, your predecessor, Party Deputy Leader, former Education Minister Michelle McAlveen announced 3.5 years ago an £800 million capital works project for schools, many of whom, perhaps the majority of whom, are still awaiting any confirmation, any progress in those schools. Isn't it, Minister, cynical to simply come to this chamber, throw around numbers when there's no clarity on when or how this investment is going to be delivered?
Well, I think the member knows what the cynical comment that he made during that debate in terms of AI, and maybe in responding to me he'll have an opportunity to retract what was a false allegation and apologise for it, and we'll wait and see if he decides to take that opportunity. The member is right to highlight the extreme capital needs that exists within the education estate. In terms of a crumbling school estate, an inability to carry out the maintenance, that we're down to essential repairs to keep them open and safe, and therefore we are not able to provide the level of investment that we need. What would be wrong, though, and I think what would be inappropriate, would be for a minister just to then say we're not even going to carry out the detailed work which we did endeavour to provide the process where we've identified special schools to expand, specialist provision to expand. And what I would say to the member, the principals responded hugely positively to that statement that I made in the Assembly. It is currently before the Executive. They were part of that process. Absolutely, funding needs to be secured in order to deliver on that. But I think it would be a failure on my part not to have commissioned the work, executed that, published it, and of course then I need to get the funding associated with it. And the answer was not generated by AI, and I trust the member will now retract and apologise for his false allegation 2 weeks ago.
Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, since we're here and I wasn't going to raise this subject, I won't be retracting or apologising. My job is to ask the Minister questions. I make zero apology for that. The Minister is more than capable of coming in here and defending himself. In actual fact, if I may, just with the slight indulgence of the Deputy Speaker, since it was raised by the Minister, I did ask him a written question which said to ask the Minister whether any artificial intelligence tool has been used to edit any or all part of any statement he had made to the Assembly. His answer from his department was no such information is held, so he can't be definitive in denying that. I think I will infer from his statement that some tool was used. But to one side, I leave that to one side, Mr Deputy Speaker. I want to ask this question, which is about delivering on promises made. Have there been actual, practical conversations with the Finance Minister about the multi-year budget we expect later this year? Will what he is calling for be backed up in a multi-year budget? Because that's his responsibility too.
Minister, you can answer whichever part of that multiple selection you can think of.
Well, Deputy Speaker, never mind artificial intelligence. I'm concerned about actual intelligence when the member raises these questions. I've spent £110 million over the last 2 years providing support and ensuring that we've nearly 3,000 places for our young people who need it. I've engaged proactively with the Finance Minister. I've outlined to him, and he's working with me on the 10-year plan. So there is proactive work that I am engaging in. What I would say to the member who raised the issue around AI, his own party put out a statement welcoming the use of AI. His own member from Foyle pays a subscription for AI to assist her in her job. So if there's a cynic in this Assembly, it's the member for South Belfast, leader of the so-called opposition.
Constructive opposition.
Mr. Butler.
Mr. Speaker, it seems a shame to break this one up. Last week, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the one-man wave machine that is President Trump punched down on the autistic community when he said that paracetamol leads to autism. I was contacted by many families last week concerned that some of the advice that's going around at the moment is not fit nor fair and that it did them a disservice. Would the Minister like to give confidence to those parents out there who will see paracetamol administered to their children in schools and that there is no link to autism?
I am nowhere near qualified when it comes to commenting on medical and health issues. I didn't follow in detail what President Trump said. I believe it was in reference to women who are pregnant, and I'm pretty sure that I'm never going to be in that position. But obviously I've listened to some health professionals in Northern Ireland who have dismissed what President Trump has said, and I will defer to those medical experts, and I certainly won't be saying anything contrary to their opinion.
Thank you, Minister. Along with that, he also claimed that the MMR vaccine should be taken separately, and that is also a school-administered vaccine. Would the Minister defer to... Yeah, well, it's given in schools, so it's given to schools. Would the Minister have confidence in the MMR vaccine that's given to our school children?
Before we continue, and Minister Weatherly decides that, these are education questions. And Mr Butler, I am sure, more than anybody in this room, you know what health questions are about. Minister, you can choose to answer that or not, or we can move on. Oh, happy to move on. Mr Allen, Andy Allen.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And if I may, I would like to pivot back to the last listed question, as the Minister didn't get ample enough time to answer it. And it is an area that we're all interested in, and that's SEN provision. And I'm sure, like other members, or like myself, other members are contacted regularly regarding this. The Minister mentioned regulations to reduce the time waited for statements. Is there anything else the Department's doing, and when are we likely to see those regulations?
Well, Deputy Speaker, I've said before in this Assembly that whenever we get to the stage where young people and families are having to go through a statementing process, we have failed them. We shouldn't have to go through a statementing process in order to be making the appropriate provision to meet their needs. And that's why we're trying to take forward the changes when it comes to special educational needs, that we can identify the requirements of those young people, provide the appropriate support for schools to then meet that need. And that is part of the work that we're seeking to take forward as part of our transformation programme when it comes to special educational needs.
Minister, for his answer, and it does highlight many more questions, and if I may, I'll maybe ping two out. There are many more. Minister, what interim support is being provided to schools in terms of support whilst a child is waiting for that educational statement? And I do appreciate you're saying that's not the approach that we should be taking, but it is the current approach in front of us. And indeed, what support is available to parents who are going through that statement process to be able to interact with that statement and make sure the statement best meets the child's needs?
So obviously there'll be support throughout that process, and the member will know the various ways that you can be referred into that. It can be parental referral, it can be through the school, it can be through educational psychologists or paediatricians can all make referrals, and then an assessment process can take place. What I am trying to enable, having engaged with now a lot of principals in this area, that they feel that there would be a better way to have resources within the school in order for them to have some autonomy as to how best the needs can be met, because the various different needs present in different ways. It can be speech, communication, it can be behavioural, and schools will say to me that if they are able to have a resource, they can utilise support in a way that they believe will be more effective for the whole school population, not just those young people who have a statement, because there are thousands of children who have additional needs and they do not have a statement. So we need to empower schools with a degree of autonomy accompanied by resource as to how best that can be deployed. That could be employing a full-time teacher that can have smaller class settings. It could be through a youth worker, and I've been in schools who have employed youth workers. I've been in schools where they're employing counsellors, and we need to just find a better framework for our schools to operate in a way that I believe will be more beneficial for our children and young people in terms of achieving better outcomes.
Mr. Clark. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I don't want to waste my time talking about AI or health questions. So can I ask the Minister, given that curriculum is very important for education, could you give us an update on the review of the curriculum, please?
Thank you, Member and Deputy Speaker. On the 27th of August, I announced the establishment of the Curriculum Task Force Advisory Committee. That will oversee, direct and lead the reform of the Northern Ireland curriculum. It's going to be led by Christine Council, with Lucy Crane as the Deputy. The committee includes a wealth of experience of curriculum design, classroom practice, evaluation and implementation. The task force will commence work in October. Their role is to guide the development of a new, coherent and knowledge-rich curriculum framework. Following this, a new framework will be presented by spring of 2026. It will then be subject to public consultation. This is an ambitious and challenging framework, but I am confident that the task force will deliver and that the new curriculum framework will be operational by September 2027, which is what I have set out in my delivery plan.
Minister, we expect curriculum to be very important. Teachers is also a very important role to play as well. So can I ask, in terms of this review, the work you're carrying out, what engagement you actually have with the teachers themselves?
The member is right. Teachers are hugely important, and I've noticed the cynical way in which the SDLP, Leader of the Opposition, has even responded to this question, not having a particular interest, questioning the merit and the validity of the question that's being asked. Curriculum reform is fundamental to an effective education system. Don't take my word for it. This morning I opened a conference at the Le Mans Hotel in Belfast. We had over 400 post-primary school teachers were there with a real desire to engage in this. Tomorrow, and the member is welcome to join me if he wishes, I'll be hosting 600 primary school leaders, and that is a remarkable level of participation. It's testament to the passion and commitment of our education workforce. These are teachers from across every single sector within our education system, all united behind the common belief and desire to have an effective curriculum which enables them to educate our children and young people. So some members may not realise what's going on in terms of the education system, but it is transformational what is happening, and it will be to the benefit of every single child, particularly those who have disadvantage, providing greater equity for them and inclusion, no child being left behind. And that's what we're engaged in when it comes to the Transform Ed, which is the transformational programme that we're delivering in education.
Mr. Frew. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Can I ask the Minister, has he had the opportunity to consider the findings of the recently published Parent Kind survey with regards to Northern Ireland?
Deputy Speaker, I have, and can I welcome those findings? I'm pleased that parents in Northern Ireland were included in the survey, and I'm grateful for Parent Kind in providing the insight into the issues that are important to parents and their children. The Northern Ireland report gives a clear indication of matters of relevance to our parents today. For example, parental fears around safety of children, special educational needs, the overuse of mobile phones, general views on school and home life, and some of the more broader challenges that parents are facing. And moving forward, I've asked officials to consider the findings of the survey as part of their policy areas.
The Minister for his answer. Can you give any particulars around the findings in relation to the use of toilets, and do they reflect the common sense of Northern Ireland people?
Deputy Speaker, yes. The survey findings, indeed, from parents reflect the common sense of the vast majority of the people of Northern Ireland, particularly 2/3 of parents surveyed indicating that the use of toilets should be determined by biological sex. And in terms of the law, Regulation 10.2 of the School Premises Standards Regulation Northern Ireland 1973 states the following: for all pupils above the age of 6, separate sanitary fittings shall be provided for boys and girls. The survey findings also reinforce that there is wider public support for my recent policy statement, particularly on the use of toilets and changing facilities issued on the 8th of September. Deputy Speaker, I was confident that the overwhelming majority of people of Northern Ireland supported my common sense position when it comes to biological sex, and the findings of this survey affirm that I am right and other members in this chamber are completely wrong and out of touch.
Could I ask the Minister around the childcare subsidy scheme? Does the Minister recognise that the scheme's very welcome expansions also lead to some practical challenges for schools and nurseries in terms of catering for numbers which are much increased from the fewer numbers that they have been previous?
The expansion of the childcare subsidy scheme, we moved from 0 to 5 years of age to all school-age children up to the age of 11, so our primary schools. We know that there are 72 schools in Northern Ireland that are registered to the UK tax-free childcare allowance system. and we've been working with those 72 schools to make sure that they can make available then the childcare subsidy scheme, because that is providing an additional 15% reduction in terms of the bills. We're providing the finance to support the schools so that any administration costs can be dealt with, and indeed they are minimal in terms of that process. What I would like to see is even more schools providing this support, because we're going to support them to deliver it. Thank you.
That concludes questions to the Minister for Education. We take our ease when we get ready for the next item of business.